So the Electoral Court has ruled that former President Jacob Zuma can run for a seat in the National Assembly during May's election. It set aside the Independent Electoral Commission's previous decision to disqualify him. The decision means that Zuma will appear on the ballot for the uMkhonto Sizwe party after it successfully argued that the IEC has no authority on the matter. It claimed that the decision should be left to Parliament. The IEC yesterday argued that Zuma's 15-month contempt of court sentence without the exemption of a fine, which was handed down in 2021, meant he wasn't eligible. Let's now unpack this with political analyst Sanusha Naidu. Sanusha, good morning to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I think a really great place to start would just be, were you surprised by the ruling by the Electoral Court yesterday?
Good morning, Naledi. Good morning to the viewers. I think it did really surprise a lot of people, and myself included, because the idea in which the IEC had noted the disqualification of former President Zuma was in terms of the Constitution and, of course, what their legal counsel had argued in the court application around Section 44 of the Constitution. And I think it was on that basis that even constitutional law experts kind of felt that this was very clear and very coherent in terms of what the rules and what the law had actually indicated. So in the context of what the ruling has been, I think it's going to be important to try and get the judgment from the ruling and to actually see what were the reasonings for the ruling to be made in the way that it was. And more importantly, I think the IEC will be making sure that it has a clearer understanding of and applying all of its legal minds to this decision by the court the Electoral Court, in terms of giving now Mr. Jacob Zuma the opportunity to stand in the election and to become a candidate on the ballot paper, but also in terms of a seat in the National Assembly.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about how the party has argued that the decision really should be left to Parliament? In your understanding, how would that work?
Well, I'm not a legal expert and I'm not a constitutional law expert, so that in itself, I think you'll have to really get into that space in terms of the legalities of this. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, it is the question around whether, and this is my understanding, and I stand corrected on this, is that there could be a possibility that if somebody nominates former President Zuma within the National Assembly, there could be an objection to it, and that's the way I'm seeing it. I could be wrong, because it's a very complicated set of issues as well. And these are some of the commentaries now that are coming out in terms of what are some of the challenges or some of the implications that this has for this decision in terms of the National Assembly saying, okay, we have to now decide whether we want to go forward on this. So it's the rules of the National Assembly that will then be put into test in the context of what we are talking about, and whether those objections within the National Assembly can be taken forward. Yeah,
well, I imagine that going into the day there'll be quite a bit of a legal analysis as well of this ruling. But can we talk a little bit about what this means for the party moving forward? I mean, if we had sat at the decision that was made by the IEC to disqualify former President Jacob Zuma for running as candidate for the MK party, would that, in your view, have cost the party votes?
Well, I think it would have had a much more a bigger impact on the social fabric, on the political body of the state. I think what it does now is that it emboldens the MK party. You remember that they've won a series of court battles, starting off with whether they were legitimately registered to contest this election, then about the trademark of their symbol of uMkhonto Sizwe, who owned it, etc. And now, of course, this ruling. So it kind of emboldened them in a way, and you kind of get that sense when you listen to former President Jacob Zuma outside of the court talking about his unfinished business in the union buildings. So I think this kind of gives them the sense that they're going to do really well in this election. And of course, they've raised a lot of challenges in terms of also opening up the debate and raising the debate around the legitimacy and the credibility of the IEC. And of course, now one of the things is that if the results come out in a way that don't favor them, they've got a more and more arsenal to try and push forward on this in terms of the narrative, in terms of the way they're going to construct that narrative. So I think in a way, it kind of gives them that emboldened feeling going into this election.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about what some of the other parties certainly are feeling at the moment in your view? I mean, the likes of the African National Congress, having watched that ruling coming out of the Electoral Court, are they worried? Should they be?
I think they're definitely worried. I mean, any party that has been so caught up in trying to push this MK party out of the electoral space will actually have a lot of concerns and a lot of immediate challenges in terms of what does this mean for us. So definitely they are concerned. It's about the KZN vote as well. It's about whether or not the ANC will retain KZN. It's about the fact that this party will, how the MK party will deepen its electoral footprint and so forth. And I think for other opposition parties, particularly like the IFP as well, it raises the question around how that splits the vote in KwaZulu-Natal. We have noted that in the context of KwaZulu-Natal, IFP has been doing well in by-elections, but so too in certain of the by-elections, the MK party has done well. I think for a party like the DA, it raises the specter as well in terms of saying, well, look, you've now got a much more complicated electoral landscape, and you've got this MK party and you've got this ANC fighting it out. So obviously, are we a safer bet, etc. And I think that's going to be key in the last few weeks as the election, as we move in towards the election at the end of May. So I think for smaller political parties, it's also about how they may want to reconfigure themselves and try and see where they see their support or their alignment with the MK party. For the MK party is how will they be kingmaker and what kind of positioning they will take. And for the ANC, I think it's really, the battling of its wounds right now.
Yeah, it really stands out for me what we heard from Advocate Tembek and Toby yesterday as he told the court of Section 47 of the Constitution. But he goes on to say, Constitution drafters are trying to tell us that serious lawbreakers should not be lawmakers. He goes on to say that the court remission did not mean Zuma. That's Zuma's remission, of course, on his sentencing. The court remission does not mean Zuma was not found guilty of an offence. Mr. Zuma was found guilty of a crime of contempt. That is a conviction. Do you feel in any way, Sanusha, that we are facing an integrity crisis where lawmakers are concerned moving forward into this new term post the 29th of May?
Well, I think we're facing a general and a broad integrity crisis of the democracy. Whether or not it's on the basis of what the advocate had said in his arguments yesterday around Section 47 and the interpretation of Section 47, but also in terms of the integrity of the IEC, the integrity of the judiciary. And a lot of this now has been about democracy by litigation, and the judiciary is becoming an arbitrator of this democracy in the sense that it's trying to build and it's trying to put out flames and douse flames here and there. And of course, this is the challenge, because if these rulings don't come out in the way that certain people feel that the interpretation is in their context seen as a particular way in which the statutes are interpreted, then you kind of see these rebel-rousing and the narrative and the populist attacks happening outside of court, which is also very nerve-wracking and concerning. So I think at the end of the day, it's not just about the integrity of the lawmakers and who can become part of the policy environment and part of the government or part of the opposition in parliament, etc., and how this may impact on lawmaking. But it's also about where we're going with this democracy, if indeed it's being litigated in the manner that it's being litigated.
Yeah, Sanusha, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Political analyst Sanusha Naidu speaking to us this morning.